Yeah, second, and we did first, to be on the smart team, and then
Next week, so today it's
he felt good about it. Plays and all these issues, and I think he just.
Oh, that's
So
in
he's
the one.
Fill that up.
That's the only one that.
Sorry about that. Always forget.
Saturday. I haven't seen him.
Oh, we have a
But he comes to buy steel from me.
Clear now.
Oh,
I don't like it.
You know me.
Oh, yeah.
First grade.
March out of it.
I hope so.
Chat.
I think a couple of times they have actually practiced down in the park.
I see.
August. Hey, August 29th.
Okay.
What?
Oh, I'm gonna pass the park.
That's the after.
Okay, August 28th.
First house there.
No, I think you're meeting.
We'll get it done. Don't you worry about it. We'll get it done.
Got this Wednesday, next Wednesday, and then.
Weddings,
Yes.
music, during farmers market.
Been a long haul.
Sundays.
Feel better once we get all adopted, new applications, really start getting.
Try to switch up my whole stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Biker wedding.
Guys always sit down.
They had all those comments about
I
why it
really
was
didn't
like.
now want to be here. I didn't want to, really didn't make one.
Do you need anything? I'll go get Hannah and you guys. Oh,
If I have an issue.
Where agendas are there. It'll be fun. I'm gonna go grab- I saw a printout of the thorough.
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
Good. My problem is
Do we need a
I keep
printout?
the windows open.
Jeff, do we need a printout of the recommendations?
I have it.
What?
You got it. I've got one.
Balls, you got one.
Well, just do the one tonight.
That's right. Yeah, just for discussion.
Okay.
Here, and I can tell you, it used to,
Yeah, wow.
like you can't move a concrete truck that has string pipes, numbers on it. About 6:45 every day. Comes in from Dell 132. And then you want to accelerate up the hill. Probably about 3 or 4 minutes.
After rush and before rush.
Yep.
KK, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Yes, can you hear me?
Tomatoes have been. The green trees.
Yes.
That's all white, let's look at those.
Should be joining us, right?
KK's on there. I haven't seen Brandon yet.
Out of sync with yours.
Kayla, I'm getting lots of feedback.
We're
on
not hearing
your
KK.
end, So you may have to repeat
Yeah.
things, or I may need to.
And then I think that the show is mute. Someone else just joined. Brandon just joined. Brandon, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear everyone.
Oh, yeah. Can't hear him either.
We can read
Hi,
lips.
Brandon.
I wonder if something happened with that TV.
You look so young.
That's his idea.
Carded.
17th.
I was
Yeah, just-
Do we need to have something on one of our ends? You don't have to vote?
Oh, yeah, next year.
Early and vote often. Chicago way. Vote early, vote often. Early, vote often, because this is the Chicago.
Brandon, can you try speaking again?
Yeah, sure, I could talk all night if you want.
Is this mic supposed to work? Or is it?
It is a little iffy on that mic, but the sound is what should work.
Right.
Oh, you're right.
Is something off underneath your desk? Like a pane or something?
What have you done to it, Ed?
Lawyer voodoo magic, you know? How are you?
Fine, please.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hearing anything.
Me too. My dog with us. Just a couple of us. Okay. Taste, you know what I just did? We just created a whole other problem.
Jeff, how are things going?
Bad, how are you?
Complain?
Can you hear us a little, KK?
It's fun.
Yeah. Great week.
Yes, I can hear you a little now. The feedback seems to be a lot better.
It's hard to find.
Yeah, it is.
KK, can you
I-
try
I-
speaking
My dad's
now?
looking for gun range ground just anywhere within an hour drive of Fishers. He can't find,
I'm sorry, Kayla, I couldn't hear you.
you know, that's not in town or something like that. Yeah, he just wants a place that he can go out back and go shooting, yeah. So, and obviously he doesn't want to disturb any neighbors, so he wants it to be.
They can hear us,
Oh, weather.
okay, okay. Kayla, can you try to turn the remote, or the volume up on the remote? Okay, you say is the remote may be down. So if you turn the volume up on the TV, so now.
Enter your meeting ID followed by
Like
pound.
the microphone, it says line.
You have not entered any numbers. Please read.
Same as system. Well, okay, so there's a line and you don't have high definition audio.
Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise,
Oh,
just
no.
press pound to continue.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's very, it's a, yeah.
Okay, can you speak?
You have entered the meeting as a panelist. Attendees can now hear you speak. This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, this is KK calling in by phone. Taylor?
I knew that was coming from somebody.
It's like, they, you have to buy your tickets, so they have lots of time.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, this is KK. Now I'm calling through the number on the phone. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm just gonna select this here. It just seems like it just.
Okay, can you try talking again?
Hey, hold on, can you hear us? Or can you talk now? I'm not,
First,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, she was getting a ton of feedback. Yeah.
yeah. Right, this is exactly why I showed up right on.
How's this gonna talk?
Say yes.
Wait, I'm hearing someone. That's replay.
Click the yes.
Oh, that's it.
We won't talk about things.
Chad, go tell those
Yeah.
people no dogs allowed on the sidewalk.
No. No furry friends on the side.
It's a good opportunity.
Just be chatting.
What's today?
I could take this anytime. Okay. Oh, you filled out my.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yay.
Yay! Okay, much better. I'm not getting all the awful feedback now.
Okay.
Well, Brandon,
Brandon, can we hear you?
Yeah, everyone's coming in loud and clear.
I don't know. It took a while. Thank you. I appreciate
Like-
you.
like those notes,
Virtual
write those
meetings are
notes.
kind of new, so it's fine.
Second one.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August Town of Pendleton Planning Commission meeting. Thank you for your patience. And audio challenge there, if you would. If I could have a roll call, please, starting to my left.
Connie Schultz Hines.
Brad Ballantyne.
Kyle Eichhorn.
Tim Pritchard.
Jenny Sisson.
Carol Hannah.
Cheryl Reagan Hunt.
Thank you, folks. We have a full quorum. If I could please have the board review the minutes submitted. Request a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Thank you,
second that.
Thank you, Kyle and Brad. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Thank you. Old business, Kayla.
Let's get right into it. We've got two big items. First one is the thoroughfare plan. We are ready to make a recommendation to the town council tonight. This would count as the first reading also, so that town council on August 12th, then if you give a favorable recommendation, could adopt at their August meeting. So I'll let Ryan Phelps from Madison County Council of Government take over.
And I'm actually going to pass it right back over to Brandon. He's been the project manager on this, as you probably all know at this point. So he'll walk you through kind of where things are at.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to provide you the final Pendleton Thoroughfare Plan document, as well as conduct the formal public hearing, first reading of the document, and request a favorable recommendation of the Thoroughfare Plan. Before I go any further, though, does anything have to be formally done to open a public hearing?
This would be a good time for all the evidence to be included in the public hearing to start
Okay.
now, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing for the thoroughfare plan. We're going to consider that the first reading.
It'll be the first reading of the after the public hearing that this commission will consider a recommendation of the ordinance.
Okay.
Or the plan.
All right.
It'll be part of a resolution put into an ordinance. But
We need
that'll
to
be
vote
the-
on that or just open a meeting?
You will vote. Yeah, no,
No.
you don't need to vote on that.
Okay.
If you're presiding over the meeting, you can open it.
All right, so with that said, we'll open the special meeting for public hearing. Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. The final Thoroughfare Plan document should be located in your Google Drive folder. I want to point out 3 items about the final document that changed from the last meeting when we met in July. First, you'll notice an updated executive summary. The executive summary was the last component of the document to be completed. It provides a synopsis of the entire thoroughfare planning process, which has been ongoing for over 24 months now. Second, the public workshop section in Chapter 3 was updated based on results from the joint public workshop that was held last week. I want to take this time to thank town staff, plan commission members, and town council officials who came out to the event. We had a lot of great discussion on both the thoroughfare plan and the Unified Development Ordinance. You will see some images from the joint public workshop throughout the thoroughfare plan document. Third, by combining the input from the public workshop with the action item prioritization survey, all of the action items within the 4 timeframes have been ranked by priority. Action items now appear in priority order where they didn't before the public workshop. There are 2 common themes from prioritization. The first is the desire to implement the bicycle and pedestrian master plan and create a dedicated sidewalk improvement program to replace existing sidewalks and fill in the gaps where sidewalks are missing. The second is the desire to prioritize the North Heritage Way Extension project. In closing, it has been great to work with town staff and the Pendleton Plan Commission during this process. Our last step in the process will be seeking the adoption of the thoroughfare plan at the August 12th Town Council meeting. I could take any of your questions now before we close out the public hearing and seek a favorable recommendation.
Thank you, Brandon. Questions from the board? Comments? Anybody from the audience or staff? Okay. Therefore, I'll ask for a favorable recommendation on the thoroughfare plan to pass on to the council, please.
Tim, have we closed the?
What, to close it?
Yeah, please close the
Okay.
public hearing before you invite them.
All right,
Thanks.
we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on the thoroughfare plan and go back to the regular scheduled meeting now. So I will ask for a favorable recommendation.
I'll make that motion for
Th-
favorable.
Thank you, Carol. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Jen. All those in favor for the thoroughfare plan as submitted and just read, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all so much for all your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The load off your plate. Big load. Okay, UDO.
All right, so tonight you're just reviewing the UDO update. We will be having a special plan commission meeting. Thank you all so much for being available for that next Wednesday. And Denise, am I right? Is that at 7? Okay, so same time, just next Wednesday. And we'll be just doing the same exact thing, public hearing, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, making a favorable recommendation to the town council, which will be the next night. So KK is available today to give us updates and kind of just talk over the public workshop. And that way, hopefully it's smooth sailing next week at the public hearing.
Any questions?
There was a memo in your file that was uploaded that just kind of summarized where we're at right now. Basically, to continue the Thoroughfare Plan Love Fest, I just wanted to say that we really appreciated doing this process at the same time. And there were a couple things that we worked very closely with the team on, including intersection visibility and right-of-way dedication. As you know, the Thoroughfare Plan is a plan, and you need ordinances to actually help implement that. So that's one of the things the UDO will do that you will see. We shared that open house with the MPO group last week. Saw many of you there. We had one comment card that was collected, and it was basically all the people we talked to seemed very happy that it was happening. The comment card actually asked for tighter standards on landscaping, open space, and lighting than what was proposed. So that's something you can see the details in the memo that you may want to look further at. This has been available for public review since July 15th. We've had several steering committee meetings, a couple focus groups, and as Kayla mentioned, we do have the public hearing next week where we will go through kind of an overview of what this combined zoning and subdivision ordinance contains. We did have some other additional comments on the draft from Kyle Eichhorn and from another local surveyor that we may want to discuss more next week. The process, how it works is under state law, you have officially as the Plan Commission, the public hearing, and then you make a recommendation to the town council. So that's what we hope will happen next week at the special meeting, and it's up to the town council to adopt the UDO by ordinance, not by resolution as they do with plans. And then once it's adopted, it has to be published in the newspaper. It has to be recorded with the county recorder, has to be kept on file in the clerk treasurer's office. So this is an actual ordinance, and the rules for that differ from the plan. So it's a little confusing since we're doing both things at once. After adoption, we are going to have a training workshop, which we hope will get into more detail, and we'll be coordinating that with staff, but it would definitely include Plan Commission members to kind of show how to use this new combined document. And I am open for any questions you might have right now, including if you want to give me directions on what to include next week in the presentation. Well, you mentioned that there were some things that came up that we might want to consider, but wouldn't we want to consider that before next week? Right. So those are included in the memo that I uploaded, and we can discuss them now if you wish, or you can review them before next week. It's entirely up to you all how you want to handle that. Which
where is the memo?
Yeah.
It's called, it's called Pendleton UDO Draft PC Report. Yeah.
So if you want me to run over those real quickly, the
Please do.
Yeah, okay. The comment that we got at the open house was with regards to landscaping, just the desire to add supporting native wildlife as one of the purposes for the town's landscape requirements. So that's an easy addition if no one objects to that. Another comment was open space standards and just making sure that the percentage of required open space cannot possibly be fulfilled by retention ponds, and wanting to make sure that there are trees included. I know there are some communities in central Indiana, the open space is entirely retention ponds. And then the other comment had to do with lighting standards and a desire to go beyond what was proposed as far as shielding lighting with our ordinance, and adding a goal to basically follow international dark sky standards and their principles for reducing light pollution. And it included an attachment that showed a graphic of acceptable and unacceptable light fixture designs. So that's kind of a summary of what was on that comment card that we received. And then I don't know if Kyle wants to go over his comments, or if you want me to run through those for you also.
Yeah, I can. I was trying to find what the UDO says about open space, but I couldn't find it there.
Well, I have everything pulled up at that right now.
That's
So I don't
fine.
have that in front of me, but I definitely can for next week.
No, I can cover mine quickly. So the first one was lot size. All the zones except SF4 said per unit on the lot size. So that was just kind of a clarification. And then landscape buffers. I looked at some other UDOs around, and some of them include a buffer for ag use and some don't. So I guess that would be up to the commission if they wanted to include an additional buffer between ag and other uses. And then I felt like maybe we should strengthen the heaviest type of buffer. I know there has been discussion in the past that, you know, you build these landscape buffers and it takes 20 or 25 years for them to fill out and look good. So maybe a consideration to maybe create some larger berms or more tree requirements just to strengthen those initially. The other comment about subdivision buffers, we have verbiage in there about a 40-foot perimeter buffer, but in an effort to provide some additional shielding from rears of houses, so you're not driving down a tunnel of the backs of houses as you're going down the county road, maybe consideration to maybe increase that to 60 foot when the rear of houses face the perimeter street. I did also see where some communities increase that as the classification of the road increases. So if you're out on 67, maybe it's 100 feet. If you're on a smaller road, maybe it's less. That could be a consideration. And then the other one, setback on solar systems. So some of these commercial solar systems are hundreds or thousands of acres, nothing compared to what IMPA builds. And so my thought was to increase the setback for commercial solar energy. And then I guess to go back to the landscape buffers, I think any buffers on major subdivisions should be included in common area so that it's a responsibility of the HOA to maintain and not on a private lot. So if the trees die or there's maintenance issues, you're not trying to track down a private landowner. So that was really all mainly related to landscaping. So
And you're all great suggestions.
Can you comment on those, KK, please?
No, I mean, on some of those are easy fixes. Other ones, it's just up to the town to decide which direction you want to go. Do you want a heavier buffer or not? Those are really, we can make it whatever you want. So we just kind of started with, you know, some tests with the steering committee, and can definitely increase them, but that's up to you all.
Well, now's the time to increase them. We can always make them smaller.
And it's consistent with what we've been asking for the most part. I think if
I will say, if you're looking for immediate impact, some communities do require a wall or a fence, like a 6-foot fence or something like that, instead of waiting for years for evergreens to grow or shrubs to fill in or whatever. So if immediacy is your concern, you may want to consider, instead of making the fence an option, making it a requirement, the fence or the wall.
Fences scary. They tend to be unmaintained and over time seem to go downhill. Nobody takes care of them, especially wood ones. I'm open for comment on that. The widths and having the foliage or trees.
I just look at other subdivision, out in Green Township, Maple Trails or Springbrook, for example, their mounds are 6 to 8 feet tall. So it gives some privacy and kind of shields the neighbors from having to stare at the backs of houses.
Yeah,
Agree.
That's probably better than a fence.
Right.
Just have more ground.
Fences just,
Yeah.
nobody takes care of them. They never
Maintenance.
pay them. They end up crooked. The wind blows them over,
Yeah.
etc. They spray paint them.
I like a larger,
But a larger mound requires larger strip of ground because you have your slopes.
I think that is appropriate for your busier roads. When we had another proposal in front of us this past year that came up as a concern, having houses too close to a busy road. So I do think taller, which.
Or have
requires
it stepped as far as road classification, maybe. I mean, you could leave the 40 at a local, you could make a collector 60 and an arterial 80 or 100 with increasing levels of mounding or landscaping density.
Kayla?
I think that sounds like a great idea.
I don't have the particulars. I guess we'd want to put something like that together by next week.
Well, let's look at them now. So we want to change subdivisions. We'll stay at 40. We want to take them to 60.
Okay, does that kind of match up? And can we look into that over the course of the next week?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and come up with some options on that.
I was thinking like local 40, collector 60, arterial 80 or something.
Yeah, I think it
As it
makes
increases.
a sliding scale because your setbacks are already going to be sliding based on the type of thoroughfare class.
Okay. And possibly look at the caliper size of the trees or whatever we're going to require.
Yes, and I think the focus on that one comment card about native wildlife kind of goes into tree preservation and that kind of thing. If we're having a buffer area that is in common area that we're preserving, you could potentially kind of have a little strip of natural area
Like
to
pollinator habitat or something like that, maybe.
Yes,
Instead of just mowed lawn that True Green sprays every month, you have some natural.
So point of clarification on that. Are they talking about wildlife or flora?
They are talking about wildlife and this, but I think it's, and let me know if you think I'm wrong on this, it kind of goes together. In the subdivision buffers especially, when you're, putting in a new subdivision, and if you're taking out a lot of the trees and say a field area, anybody who's walked through a woods or a field that hasn't been mowed or anything in a little while, you see where creatures are living. And I guess that's.
So it's really a combination of flora and wildlife.
Mhm.
Okay. Because introducing actual wildlife next to the roads really does not buy us anything.
Our natural wildlife is coyotes and raccoons. So.
We'd have to buy more raccoons and coyotes. We don't have the budget for that, do we, Chet? We do?
The coyotes in my backyard now.
So, I mean, I guess you could give credit, instead of shrubs, you could have native grasses and things like that.
I do
maybe.
like that. You see Indiana native grasses.
Okay.
Okay, could you talk a little bit more about the section that's in here that does talk about like native grasses and allowing some areas to kind of go back?
Right. We basically have made that an option for the part of the landscaping, but it's got to be one of those where somebody comes in with an actual plan and a maintenance plan as part of it. And it's up to Kayla to improve it. Someone can't just let the grass grow and the weeds come up and say that's a natural area. So we did build that in, but it does need staff agreement to it so that we know it's a real thing.
Well, if this is in a buffer area, I think you mentioned having the HOA. So that is something we want to consider. as well.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, having the HOA, if it's in a residential neighborhood, in addition, having them maintain those common grounds.
Okay.
All right, and then the other part of that would be, we'll hit on all those.
Lighting standards.
A couple of questions then that I would maybe like some direction on would be whether you want buffers. Do you want us to develop a buffer for the agricultural use, and what's coming up against that?
To me, it seems like the agricultural use is the buffer.
Well, I mean, like, for example, if a field has a row, an old tree line, and they wipe it out to develop it, maybe they should replace them or try to preserve any existing trees.
We do give bonuses for tree preservation, and there are requirements for landscaping that could offset if they preserve trees. But we just did not add a category for agricultural use like we did residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, etc.
So are we saying if a cornfield is right next to a development, do we want to have a buffer? Is that what the question is?
If it is a matrix, so if there's a existing use there is no existing use agricultural. So it's the first existing least intensive use listed is, correct me if I'm wrong, KK, single family.
Right.
So there is no there's an agricultural field as the existing use and the incoming use is single family. That doesn't equal any buffer. The first combination, I believe, is actually even single family next to single family wouldn't bring in any buffer. But say you have incoming use is single family and it's butting up against an industrial site, then they would have to put in a type 1 buffer, I believe, or if you have the reverse where you have a industrial site coming in, or say a manufacturing plant next to like Dodd Technologies coming in next to Hunstinger Farm, if that combination happened, that would probably be a type 3 buffer where you would have a very wide buffer to kind of shelter those residents against the industrial or manufacturing use that's next door.
Revert back to the extreme.
Yes.
Now the major subdivision buffer, would that apply around the entire perimeter though?
Right, but it's a separate thing. This is a land use space buffer.
Yeah, so that's for like major subdivisions.
And that only, the perimeter buffer only applies to major subdivisions.
I think that probably covers it. I mean, that's the main concern, right? It's major subdivisions.
I think this is one.
Well, that or you have an industrial starts butting up to a subdivision.
Well, that's already covered in the matrix.
Yeah.
But where's agriculture come in then? I mean, we're talking, where's the agricultural use come into all this conversation? I'm missing.
Agriculture is kind of in-town limits is kind of a placeholder zoning, where we see that as eventually it'll in-town limits likely be rezoned to something more intensive. So if you have
and then when it gets rezoned and is used more intensive, the buffer applies. Then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, if we were in the county or in another area where we were really involved in green belt preservation or ag land preservation, where preservation of those agricultural areas was maybe more of a priority, then this might be more appropriate. However, as a town, and this all being in town limits, I think that's another reason that the agricultural use doesn't need to be in this matrix.
So do we have no effort at all to maintain agricultural lands within the town limits?
Not as far as buffers go.
We developed 2 agricultural zoning districts as part of this ordinance. So there are standards and uses, and what we did actually was break it down because agriculture differs so much between very heavy industrial and lighter, I mean, very heavy, almost industrial like agriculture, and then, row crops or something like that. So it's very different. So we do have ag zoning districts and in the town just in case.
Well, and I guess what I picked up on is it sounded as if the agricultural lands are nothing more than a holding before more intensive development.
In a municipality, that's typically true. If you were a county plan commission, or if you had an extraterritorial jurisdiction under your control, that might be different. But as long as you're within municipal limits, 95% of the time or more, it kind of acts just because of the way development works as a holding zone. That's a business decision more than anything.
Are you asking then we should have a limit on how much ag we can lose?
Well, I think that's one of my concerns, and that ties right into the density. If you were to look once again at SF3, SF4, those are very high density development.
Those are
areas.
actually not high density by any stretch of the imagination. They might be for Pendleton, but they are not even for the rest of the state.
This is not going to happen overnight. I know.
I totally understand that I may be dead by this time this happens, but when you're looking at 6 homes per acre, I mean, that, comparing it to what has traditionally been done in Pendleton, is a very high density. And when we look at the stress that's being put on the infrastructure for transportation and the limitations there, once again, we've got to kind of balance. Do we want this to look like whatever communities you're citing in the state that have higher densities? Or do we want to preserve more of the feel of Pendleton?
So what we did is go back to the comprehensive plan recommendations that you all adopted, which called for more housing options in Pendleton. Instead of the 14,000 plus square foot size lot you have now, the comprehensive plan gave us direction that there needed to be more different types of housing to retain younger people, for older people, for different kinds of families and so forth. So that's what this was trying to do. It's not saying the whole town's going to go that way. And if you develop in this zoning district, you would have to meet all the standards, including architectural standards and everything else. But this is not something that just we pulled out of the air. It came from your adopted comprehensive plan, that direction.
I think that part of what we were looking at too is making it easier for there to be a transition between that large scale 40-acre agricultural site and what residents that want to be closer to town want, even in the rural locations, which is going to be more hobby farm type settings. So I think between the 2 ag lot areas, yeah, it's kind of a ag one, that big ag. It is kind of a holding district, like KK said, but we've made it easy for it to transition legally more easily over time. And if Pendleton wants to maintain that ag feel and a more rural area, we've got room in this ordinance to do that too. And you guys are really good about not permitting sprawl or uncontrolled growth, which I know is also part of our comp plan. So when we look at our map and all that ag area on there, I trust this board to make really good decisions about where that intense growth should go, close to our town core, where we have utilities, where we have road systems that are developing to handle it, and let those further out regions remain agricultural for a longer period of time.
Are there communities that have that restriction?
KK, you might know better than I do on this.
I'm not sure I understand what the question was.
Are there communities that have a restriction to say we're going to retain 10% of our agricultural land permanently?
No, not well. In Indiana, not really. Okay, it's that is something that has not been very accepted in the state. There have been some small inroads, but it's certainly not a common thing in Indiana. Kayla, if you've got specific examples to share, but it's not through zoning that happens. I've seen other things like tax things and so forth.
In California, they've got something like this around the California coastline. And like, I'm thinking about Hearst Castle, actually. If any of you guys have been out to San Luis Obispo area, I think north of LA, there's a section there where there are basically cows grazing on the beach. And that does not happen because of the lack of planting there. They decided, I believe, and I could be totally mistaken on how I'm remembering this, there's a green belt situation around certain areas. So they're trying to keep all the growth in this area, have a green belt, and preserve kind of those more rural farm communities and that landscape. I don't think we're there yet, but maybe that's something we take into consideration as if we take on extraterritorial jurisdiction of the land around Pendleton. Jeff, is that something that we could consider?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a game changer in terms of the type of land you'd be dealing with. So yeah, absolutely. And that's discussions with the county have begun on that. So
I think it'd be awful difficult to tell a farmer he can't sell his ground for $50,000 an acre to a developer. But on the other hand, we don't want to lose all of our agriculture either. I think that's where you were headed, Brad. You don't want to see all, I mean, like you said, we'll be dead by then, but every field in this city limits have a house on it.
There's a lot of diversity in the Pendleton community in South Madison County today. And I don't feel as if we are trying to preserve it. I think that we are trying to establish this as a high density suburban growth area. And that's my biggest fear, is that we lose that diversity that we have today. And when I look at two of the residential classifications being, up to 6 homes per acre, and I realize that in certain areas that may not be high density, but I would say in central Indiana and the communities that I have lived in, that is considered pretty high density. And when you look at the inability for getting a vehicle between 2 homes to a backyard, when you look at playgrounds being closed because of COVID, we closed down our playgrounds here because they were public spaces, forcing families into their own properties and yards. 1/6 of an acre with very short setbacks on the side, short setbacks in the rear. It's a different housing environment than I think the majority of people that have moved to Pendleton are looking for historically.
If the town continues to pursue adding parks and parkland as we build out subdivisions and that pedestrian plan, do you think that would answer some of
No.
those needs?
Not from my perspective. I think, yes, we need to continue to build additional park and recreational areas because we are handling not only the town of Pendleton, but all of South Madison. We've talked about that, the fact that the South Madison community truly is the southern 3 townships. So we have got to continue to increase our park and recreational areas because we are the hub. But I think we also have to have reasonable space for families, homes, and structures as we continue to do the development. And I'm very concerned that we have 2 of them that are, in my opinion, very high density. And I'm concerned that we will not control that because it's probably in the developer's best interest to increase the density of the number of homes on that property from a profitability perspective.
I guess this is one of my areas I feel really passionately about is farmland preservation in the areas outside of town. And in my mind, that means we need to make it more intense development inside of our town limits so that we're basically continuing our town feel inside of town limits, and that with the expectation and hope that we won't stretch all the way to Ohio with 2 lots per acre. We're blessed with wonderful fertile farmland and it goes, for a long way here in Indiana, but it's not infinite. And so if we don't intensify our units per acre in town areas where we have water, utilities, and electric to support them, I'm afraid we'll end up with low intensity development, but it'll take up all the farmland. So that is, I know that was something that informed my decisions. And when I was reading through this UDO.
I
Your
mean,
your analogy then is more houses will take up more land versus tighter houses take up less land.
Yeah. if
Right.
we-
And it
if units per
for
acre.
the town to service the lots that are strung out more, there's more roadway, more utility footage, et cetera. Longer routes for things than if you have more condensed infill type development. And I think looking back at your comprehensive plan, what it was saying is we don't want the whole community to be dense, but there's a whole segment of people that can leave the community because you don't have the housing here for them. The young professionals don't want a third of an acre lot to maintain and can't afford it probably. So I think that's where some of that concern came from. At the end of the day, we're your consultant. We were just trying to follow what the comprehensive plan you adopted directed us and what the steering committee recommended when we did this.
KK, how about we make that a priority over the next week that we have to kind of give a comprehensive plan on all of those open space requirements? And so how are we, say, allowing 6 units per acre in our densest development districts, but also working to preserve open space for people to play, even if it's not owned privately, but for them to actually have open space to take advantage of?
So summarize where the UDO requires open space. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just a memo, just like you did tonight, just so we can have a good look at, okay, here's what we're doing to address this concern.
Sure, we can do that.
Brad, are you okay with that? And then if we get it up early, we can, we'd love to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I would like to see is, we talk about the town as a whole. And when we talked early on, it's sort of a concentric circle, the highest density being in the middle and stepping out. And I viewed it as stepping out and maintaining a very low density in the perimeters and not acquiescing to single family 3 and 4 in virtually every major development that we move forward. And it could be my misunderstanding, but in looking at it, it appears that you've got that potential to have high density virtually anywhere in town. Within the town boundaries, not the core town here, but within the town of Pendleton.
That's a function of the zoning map, where these zoning districts go. So as you develop a new zoning map, that's something you can decide. At the end of the day, everyone has the ability to come in and ask for a change of zoning to a different zoning district. And as with any rezoning, it would go through Plan Commission and ultimately to Town Council for approval.
Just because they ask for it, this board does not have to permit it.
Well, I think we've all seen, we're under a tremendous amount of pressure of what's going to happen over here in the coming years. I mean, they're swallowing up ground now out in Lapel and 69 just every day. Every field out there has been looked at. And it's going to come this way sooner than later.
Yeah, and we've already discussed that, Madison County does not really have a solid UDO. They don't have a good potential control on some of those developments. We've seen problems in those developments. And we've got basically one shot to get it right. Because once we start acquiescing to certain types of developments and they're not going to be replaced. They'll be here ad infinitum.
We'll wait to see the comments Wednesday. Okay.
We'll try to get those uploaded to the Google Drive sooner rather than later.
All right. Do we cover the light buffer?
Yeah, we have light standards and cutoff.
And solar setbacks will be increased from 200 to 500. I don't have a problem with that. You want to change it to 5?
Yeah, it's
We
definitely.
might as well go to the extreme now. And that's just make additional 25-foot buck strip along part of the residence subdivisions. We're good with that too. Can you add both of those, Kayla?
Yep, I thought the 25-foot buffer strip as the common area versus as like an easement really made the maintenance cut and dry, that, hey, this is the HOA's job, not each individual resident.
Okay. All right, thank you.
What about the changes to the dark sky regulations?
I guess, could you give us some options on that, Kayla? Or KK?
Sure, I can come back next week and tell you what that might look like. It would be more restrictive, as was given in the comments, like this light standard, yes, that light standard, no.
Right, okay. And in doing these changes from now until next Wednesday, we can still approve them next Wednesday and still pass this on the council. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right. Any more comments on those items or any others?
I just want to be clear.
Yeah, Jen.
I heard two things in regards to what Brad was mentioning in the response, and it was Indiana's not been partial to plans with the preservation, but then I also heard it's not really been done much, which contradicts. So can I have more information regarding that? Do we know of any communities specifically, or even, you know, surrounding states that have, I just feel like I need a platform if something's been done, or are we on the forefront of this? And if we are, great. I just feel like I don't know the answer to
As far as
that.
preserving percentage of land
Yes,
in agriculture.
yes.
Connected, just outside
Or
the
have
front of there.
people try to do this and it just wasn't adopted. I'm not clear on where we're at with that answer.
Are we talking about agricultural preservation?
Yes.
Yeah, I can in a nutshell tell you right now, the state of Indiana has a model ordinance, which we followed as much as we could when we developed this model ag ordinance with multiple zoning districts. State of Indiana has not supported ag preservation. And what has been said in the past is if we're going to do this, we want to do it by payments, but there's no funding at the state level to do it. So it has not gone anywhere. And I will tell you that I work quite a bit with Farm Bureau, so I am familiar with what's going on with this, and it's not happening in Indiana.
So are these town municipalities, or do you know if counties that are doing some preservation? Because I see two different things which we all but up.
I'm not aware of anyone doing preservation. There are efforts made to help preserve the farmland by saying you can't develop a major subdivision in an agriculturally zoned area. So that means you would have to rezone it before you could develop that. That's what our ordinance says also. So there are some attempts like that to help preserve farming that's in place, but there's no one who is actually saying you can't try to rezone this or develop this. I'm not even sure if you could legally do that in Indiana.
However, we have the power here not to rezone it.
Correct. You make certain findings. Absolutely.
You can also add agritourism as a acceptable use too, which could help preserve some farmland. So that is on our use matrix now, which is new.
Okay, Kay, thank you. We'll look forward to those comments and updates next Wednesday.
All right.
You had a question, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that, I just agree with Brad with the fact of having 6 houses in one lot, 1 acre. Because, out at Summer Lake, if one house starts fire, there's 2 or 3 of them that start fire. And if there's farther apart, they're not gonna have that as much. But I just agree with what Brad said, with so many houses in a small
Yeah, if you look at some of the numbers on here, minimum yard setbacks are 10 feet. That's ridiculous. It really is. 10 feet?
Is that for side?
No, that says back, rear yard.
Oh, yeah, I
setback.
did notice the rear yard setbacks are really low.
That is for the accessory buildings.
That's primary
Actually,
structure.
And, okay,
Structure, accessory is 5 feet, which is, that's not gonna work. And I know that we all want to get this going and move along, but we also want to be responsible and we want to be conservative.
Page reference 29, if you want to see the 10-foot setback in primary structure.
okay, we'll take a look at that.
Also page 27.
It's consistent.
Yeah.
So a quick question on what's plan commission and what's staff approval. So plan commission will do primary and then staff will do secondary and replats and minor subdivisions. Is that correct?
Okay, is that correct?
Right, so what we're trying to do is make this process so that you can spend your time on the big picture stuff, like the major subdivision primary plats. And once they know what has to be corrected, then staff can just look at that and say, check this, yes, you corrected this. No, you did not correct this, take this back. So we are trying to streamline the process a little bit. Again, there was a lot of feedback on that. And talked about that during one of our focus groups, specifically with the engineers, surveyors, et cetera.
You know, one place that came from was like, do you guys remember the Gardner replat and the Pines? Where there was an encroachment situation and they just wanted to move the lot line over like 5 to 7 feet or something.
Right.
I mean, in my mind, that's something that we as staff could have approved and saved the gardeners and you guys a lot of time and energy kind of looking at that and reviewing it. Because it was, you know, we looked at it, we checked to make sure there weren't any, you know, utilities that would have been in the way, things like that. And there was no reason they couldn't have done that through staff. So that was our thought process and moving more of those things to the staff side. And KK is there, go ahead, take over again.
I was going to say, staff is not approving discretionary things. So if like, you know, things that are discretionary, like rezonings and stuff, those are not getting out of that legal process that they're in. But state law does allow staff approval of things that are not subjective. So if you meet all the standards of the subdivision ordinance, the town has to approve it. So it becomes ministerial, not subjective. And so state law allows that to move to the staff level then.
Scott, you had a comment?
Yeah, did we talk about a mechanism that if the planning commission wanted to keep the second plat decision to themselves, that they could do that instead of?
Right, we built in a provision, and I'll have to look and see who can trigger this, where it can be kicked up to the full plan commission. Like if Kayla gets something and she thinks it's still too sticky or there's some gray area, she can send it back to the plan commission. I believe we set it up so the applicant can also do that. I can't remember if we wrote it so that the plan commission could request that. I'll have to go back and look at that.
And can we talk about the TAC committee and its role?
I'm sorry, I was typing, Kayla, what was that?
TAC committee and how that kind of changes how we've been.
Right. So we're forming a formal technical advisory committee. So we're putting into play your experts, your technical experts to review those technical items in the subdivision. And they're the ones that are going to tell you this works, this does not work. You know, looking at the drainage, the thoroughfare designs, all those kind of things, and kind of taking the guesswork out. And again, the standards are standards that the town will have adopted. And so there's not guesswork involved. It's a yes, this meets it. Yes, this meets it kind of thing.
I don't know how anybody else is feeling, but I would feel a lot more comfortable if these lot sizes were larger. You know, for instance, on page number 38, you know, they've got multifamily as 3,500 per unit. That needs to be increased.
That goes up to, so like Pendleton Place Apartments, multiple stories, so per unit, they've got this many square feet per unit. So a lot of those are stacked on top of each other, or they're party wall situations. That's where we're seeing that multifamily. And that actually, once you put a few of them together, that starts to make sense because it makes sure they have a good yard around them. And as far as the minimum lot size, we did try to keep that just to SF4, which is supposed to mimic the tradition, the historic residential area downtown, but in a newer subdivision. And the residential conservation core, which is basically the new name for historic residential, just so we don't confuse people with the historic term. That's just the same as it is right now, that 7,200 square feet, where it's a narrow lot, but it's deep, and there's an alley for both of those situations. And if there is something we need to change as far as setbacks go, that's definitely something we can look into.
Yeah, the front yard setback on the RC is 75 feet. That seem right?
Well, we expect.
Or it matches the infill, I guess, right?
Right, it matches
Okay,
the
yeah,
average.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it's dependent on the road classification. Is that
Right.
Okay. Because right now too, that's you match the block in anything that is either single family or residential core, anything that is already developed, like 25% of the block or more, we can actually not look at the plat. So say Central Way has some older homes on it. We just try to kind of match the setbacks, say up to 40 feet, I believe.
I think there's, KK, look at the matrix for RC. Something's not right in the single family column. It says maximum front yard setback 7,200 square feet. I think something got shifted, maybe.
Yes, yes. I'm so sorry. That was a
No, that's
error on
fine.
our part. I think we skipped a line or something.
Oh, you copy pasted it or something. Okay. Never mind.
I know every time we've looked at this, I mean, it's 250 pages or whatever. And, you know, we had a 3-hour, our last steering committee meeting was 3 or 4 hours long because every time you look at it, you see something else. I don't know if we're ever gonna, I don't know how to finally bring it to fruition and say, we've got something that we can, you know, every time we look at it, it seems like there's something else that comes up. I don't know.
I think you have to pass it to know what's in it. Isn't that what they say?
Shoot first.
And another thing is we shouldn't let it sit for a decade like we did last time.
Exactly.
Like you guys can say, hey, I think we need to update this, maybe at our January meeting or our February meeting
Right.
every year.
I mean, we had.
Along with the zoning
we had
map.
Hours looking at these different, at the different classifications of different, I mean, we spent a lot of time just trying to come up with what we felt like was the best option. I mean, it's not, I guess it's not perfect, but
I like that suggestion. I think the needs of the population change, and as much as we want to have forethought for the future and preservation, culturally, things change. I'm thinking of special needs population because I feel like there could be gaps, and I'm not going to rabbit hole with those things right now. But as our population is changing, especially functioning autistic people that want dwellings for themselves, I'm not sure that some of this is applicable, right? So I think, again, as best as we can, we're thinking with good intention, and we're just going to have to readopt things later on as people come in front of us with various needs. And we're seeing those things as a pattern. And I think it's up to us to have good stewardship on our people and their needs. And I know it's a balancing act.
I think we'll, between the staff and the commission, the boards, we'll have to keep an eye on what's being developed. And if we get to a certain stage where we see a trend happen, then that's the time we need to move before it gets out of hand. We can always adapt the zoning map and or this ordinance to affect that. So I think you're correct.
We'll have the ability to say.
We can
yes or no
change
to
the
these
UDO and
zones.
update the
Yeah.
UDO. We change the zoning map according to
Yeah.
what's happening in the community or, the conditions of the market or whatever. It's definitely going to change.
Well, let me ask the question, what is the process would have to be gone through? What is the timeline to modify the content of the UDO?
It would be simply a hearing in front of this commission it's a zoning change. It's no different than what we want to change an ag to an R1.
One meeting.
One meeting here in the town council. You're changing an ordinance.
So versus an amendment to the zoning map, it would just be an amendment to the UDO text. Is that right, KK?
Right, it's the same process. Plan Commission has a public hearing. You have to advertise it beforehand, and then you send a recommendation to town council.
You have a lot of leeway to change this thing. You could change it every meeting if you wanted to.
Yeah, let's not do
Well,
that.
Whoa there.
I say we start by increasing the lot size.
Let's get it printed first.
We would like you to do like an annual checkup or something though, to make sure it's really working. Yes.
And I think we will, because we'll find typos and small stuff, not necessarily these big decisions, but after the first run, we'll probably cringe a little bit. So we'll go back and have a laundry list of things that need corrected.
We had
Well,
some-
and there will, I hate to tell you, but there will be new land uses. We didn't anticipate there will be new case law that we have to address. So there will be changes that you will need to do no matter what.
It's fair enough. I think that gives me a lot of reassurance. I mean, Brad, you guys, the ability to make the changes as we go forward.
Yeah, I think there's the ability to make changes, but I also, if we don't get some of the things that are glaring corrected right now, I think we're gonna have developers come in here and say,
It says
I've
this.
developed to this standard, it's a 10-foot setback in the rear. And wait, you're changing the rules now that I've submitted it. That's my concern. So the fundamentals have to be there and then just tweak them.
And that's a good concern because we've already lived through that.
Correct. They're gonna look at those setbacks.
Yes, we will. And, please, if you see something else, reach out to Kayla as you, I know you've been looking at this since mid-July, but if you have notes or you've seen other things, please reach out to Kayla, who'll reach out to me before next week so we can do research or get you an answer. We'd appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Any further
If we
questions or
increase the
comments?
lot sizes, can we not then increase the setbacks? They not go hand in hand with one another.
They're both on there. We've asked for the setback change in the lot size.
I want a change to both,
We've asked for that.
yeah. Because Brad's right, it's like, they're gonna come right back at us and say, well, but we did what you guys have here. Now you're gonna change it on us? That's just, we're just looking for problems. If we just don't take a breath for a minute. I know y'all been working on this a long time, but we don't want to just slide in and like, let's review it later and we'll find typos or we'll do, no, we need to.
We've been, Hannah's for the last, actually since she started proofing this thing and getting it all into InDesign and put together, which has been a tedious task, has been her main priority. So she's been working hard on it. And we've been lucky to have you guys review this, and we've gotten a few copies that have just been marked up, and KK's right. We've been living and breathing this, and you just, after you see something that's spelled so many times or see something like this so many times, you don't see it
anymore. Yeah.
So yeah, if you guys want to look at this or with fresh eyes, or go through it after tonight's meeting, please do. And please email me if you find one spelling error. You've got my email, you've got my phone number. Just let me know.
Connie, are you saying one of these zoning districts, you've don't want one of those that has the smaller lot sizes? You don't think we should have that? Is that what you're?
Well, when you've got 10 feet of setback, and 7,200 or 7,500 square feet for a single family home, and you get a whole entire neighborhood of that, it becomes a little overwhelming. And we already have that. We have that with Hunsinger Farm. We've got that with Claire Glen. I mean, do we want 2 more, 4 more? I understand that we want the density closer, but how many we want to cram in? We need to be responsible. You're talking about the California, they have all over the place designated open spaces. You cannot build here. That is it. And it is designated. So I get what Brad's saying. Absolutely. No, we can't tell a farmer he can't sell. So when he sells, we've got to be responsible. We need to preserve what we have in this town. We love this town, and a lot of people do. That's why they're flocking here. But the more that flock, we're not going to love it anymore. And the ones coming aren't going to love it because it's so many people in such a small spot.
We're certainly not saying through our unified development ordinance that people have to have a 10-foot setback. They certainly can have more, but I know this board kind of has to make that decision. We have a big developer come before us with 200 some lots. It's hard to say.
Well, and I think that's our major concern when we have the developers coming in with 200 to 500 lots in a development. Yeah, there might be some 3rd-acre lots, but again, you look at those strips where you're down in, 1/6 acre lots, boom, 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 with a 10-foot setback on the rear, a 7.5 setback on the side, the inability to get a vehicle between the house and a fence. Just,
Oh, sorry. Do we have aggregate setbacks at all in this KK where we can say, hey, it's a 10-foot setback, but you have to be at least so many feet away from the other house in its backyard? And that way
20.
give people some flexibility. Okay, it's a 20 foot if you add 10 and 10,
Mhm.
but then you add in the fact that there's maybe a 40-foot aggregate. Am I reading that right, KK? Could we look into something like that?
Those can be a little problematic it's like a first come, first serve kind of thing and stuff. And so administering those in communities where I've seen them has not always worked out. But, we can certainly look at setbacks. I would encourage you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater right now, though. To remember, we're not trying to divide the town up into all small lots. That's just one. We're trying to give you more options and more options for housing. And we certainly want to preserve what you have, and we want more of what you have, but we want other options also based on what your adopted plan has told us. So we can work on setbacks and so forth, but as we talk about affordability and people buying homes and so forth, lot size has a lot to do with that affordability. So just remember that.
I did have one comment. I made it a long time ago on these animal limits for hobby farms. So like, say you're gonna raise your own pig for slaughter, you've got 150-foot setback from the property line for the pasture of that pig. So that pretty much excludes 80% of properties from even being able to fence in a pig. I think maybe the setback for pasture areas should be 0.
What zoning? The zoning.
I mean, it just
district
says for
says-
hobby farms, and it's vaguely defined what that even means. So I don't know. It just seems a little heavy-handed to say you need 150-foot setback for certain animals. I don't know if we can look at, maybe, I know the county has like a per acre limit for animals. Madison County does. Maybe that makes more sense.
What page are you on, please?
Where did you pull this one from, KK?
128.
Honestly, don't remember now because it's been so long.
I mean, this is saying a guy with with 40 acres who has horses can only have 2. Or a guy with 2 acres can have 2. It just doesn't maybe make sense. I don't know.
Kyle, you're kind of living and breathing this a little bit more than the rest of us are. Would you mind going over that particular?
Yeah, well, I mean, just for instance, I've got 10 acres.
Yeah.
My property is only 300 feet wide.
Mhm.
So I could have like a 10-foot wide enclosure in the middle and that's it on 10 acres.
Skip down the-
So yeah, that doesn't, maybe some adjustments are
Yeah.
needed there.
And then, but keep in mind, we did write this for municipality.
Well, I mean, you look at our map, there's a lot of ag, so
Right.
most of it is agricultural. I think it needs to accommodate that.
Although, and what now our hobby farms are going to be allowed in rural res as well.
Well, maybe there needs to be some distinction.
I think you'd be a great one to look over that because you do have.
I mean, I
some
can
livestock.
come up with something maybe for everybody to look at next time.
Keeping in mind if somebody actually had a house on the property right next to you, what that would mean to them.
Sure. Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe it's based on the size of your lot, maybe.
I know we have a percent setback right now on some of our residential lots, and that tends not to make sense for building setbacks, but it might actually make more sense for things like livestock. Like a
Right.
percent of the lot width.
Are you allowed to have livestock in the town limits?
Right now, under our current zoning ordinance, we have, as a community, have found it overly restrictive because it is only allowed on ag zone lots, which unless you buy a non-conforming existing ag zone lot is a 40-acre minimum, which is out of the price range of most people. So some people have managed to purchase smaller ag lots, which are non-conforming in their size, and they can have livestock. However, if you have a rural residential zone lot or a very large single-family zone lot, officially you are not allowed to have any sort of livestock. And that has been considered to be a little bit overly restrictive, especially as hobby farms have gained popularity. So that's what we were trying to address there.
So if any of the 4 single-family zoned areas in the future, are we looking at allowing them to have some livestock?
So there are restrictions. You have to have 2 acres of pasture minimum. And not allowed in a subdivision where the average lot size is less than 3 acres.
So poultry, fowl, rabbits, pheasants, turkey, no minimum, but you have to have.
We need to make sure that chickens are actually defined maybe separately in our definitions section, because I believe chickens are treated a little differently. Am I right, KK?
I would assume that falls
We
under
can prove
poultry.
chickens downtown,
But not roosters.
no roosters.
We need to make sure that's in there.
Number of roosters.
Alright.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Back to your setback, so how would you look at setbacks from the neighbors versus setbacks from the road?
Or from the property line. I mean, if you live next to a cornfield, there's no reason you can't fence at the property line.
Right, so.
And if you're there first,
Right,
I
if
mean,
you're- Yeah, up to empty ground. and roads, there's not gonna subdivision around it. That would be different.
In the past, and we've allowed horses. It's not went well. One that didn't follow the rules at all. There's 2 of them. It got real ugly with the neighbors. Tried and tried. Okay. No. No, it was not. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, KK. If you could get those comments and answers to us as quick as we could, because next Wednesday roll around pretty quick.
I will work on it starting in the morning.
All right, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, moving forward to new business, resolution establishing means of electronic communication policy.
Mr. Pritchard, I'd ask that that be tabled tonight. That, after a little bit of input from you guys, at some point, at least theoretically, the state of emergency in the state of Indiana will be lifted. And after that point, the state legislature has passed a statute which allows us to continue to meet virtually under certain conditions. If you'd like, I could put together the town council's already passed one, so they could do it. It probably each body would need to pass it. If that's something that interests this particular commission, I can have that on the agenda for the special meeting next week, because I'm sure that'll be a real short one. But I could do that or at our next regular meeting, because through August, we still can. The state of emergency in Indiana has been extended. I'd be shocked if it's not extended through September at least.
I agree. Let's plan to do that in September, not load up next Wednesday,
Yes, sir.
Counselor. So I'll make a motion to table resolution establishing electronic means of communication policy. Thank you. Any questions or comments? About the audience? Anna? All right, thank you. Denise, Kayla, thank you, Council. Meeting's adjourned. Never touched it. I'm waiting to throw it somebody someday.